Welcome to a story where survival is measured not in seconds, but in choices. Tonight, we follow Daniel, a delivery driver whose ordinary life shatters when a dying alien places the fate of Earth in his hands. Warships descend from orbit, hunters mark our planet, and one man must decide whether to hide or stand visible against extinction. This is not just a battle in space. It is a test of who we become when fear tightens its grip. Stay with us and listen closely. Rain slashed sideways through the narrow alley as Daniel sprinted, shoes slipping on slick concrete. His phone vibrated non-stop inside his jacket, but he ignored it. A shortcut meant keeping his job. A strange pulse cracked through the air like distant thunder. The streetlights flickered, then died. Ahead, something collapsed against a dumpster with a wet, choking sound. Daniel skidded to a stop. An old man in a torn suit convulsed, clutching his side. Blood pooled beneath him, but it shimmered faintly green. The pulse hit again, stronger. Windows along the alley shattered inward. The man's skin rippled unnaturally, features bending, eyes widening beyond human limits. "They found me," he rasped. A faint glow ignited on his wrist, a device humming with rising intensity. Above, unseen engines vibrated the sky. Daniel's breath fogged in sudden cold. The man grabbed his sleeve. "Take it. Now!" The pulse surged. Something in orbit had locked onto them. The light swallowed him whole. Daniel felt his body stretch into nothing, atoms scattering through cold vacuum before slamming back together. He hit solid metal hard, air blasting from his lungs. Gravity returned in a low mechanical hum. He rolled onto his back, staring up at a curved ceiling alive with shifting constellations. The floor beneath him vibrated, steady, controlled, immense, beyond a transparent arc of hull. Earth turned in silence, blue and fragile against black infinity. A warning tone pulsed through the chamber. Red symbols flared across hovering panels, alien script translating automatically inside his mind. Orbital intrusion detected, tracking Nexus signature. Daniel forced himself upright. 3 figures stood near a raised console, luminous against the cold starlight. Engines deep within the structure shifted pitch, like a predator adjusting stance. Outside, a dark shape glided past the curve of Earth's limb, too angular, too deliberate. Something was hunting. Daniel staggered toward the viewport, breath shallow as Earth rotated beneath him. "Send me back," he said. Though his voice lacked strength, one of the luminous figures stepped forward, her gaze steady. With a flick of her hand, a projection filled the air, red triangulation lines locking onto New York, converging with ruthless precision. "They follow the Nexus," she said. "If you return it, they descend." Another pulse rocked the ship. Shields flared along the hull. The dark vessel outside adjusted course, engines igniting with predatory patience. Daniel's mind raced. If he stayed, he became a target. If he left, Earth became bait. The console beside him translated incoming signals, weapon systems charging. The floor trembled harder now. He felt the device on his wrist respond, syncing with the ship's rhythm. The choice wasn't about escape. It was about consequence. He turned from Earth and faced the bridge. "Tell me what to do." Daniel gripped the edge of the central console as the Nexus flared bright against his wrist. A surge like liquid fire shot up his arm and buried itself at the base of his skull. The bridge dissolved into streams of data. He wasn't looking at panels anymore. He was inside them. Shield integrity pulsed like a second heartbeat. Engine output throbbed behind his ribs. Oxygen reserves tasted metallic in his throat. He gasped, dropping to one knee as the ship's awareness flooded him. Celestia was not machinery. It was a system of living processes, and it was sinking to him. The alien figures moved around him, their voices distant echoes through the torrent of information. Hunter targeting arrays brushed against the hull like claws testing bone. Daniel clenched his teeth. If the ship survived, he survived. He forced his breathing to match the hum beneath his feet. Slowly, the chaos aligned. Celestia's engines shifted into a low, restrained thrum as Daniel redirected power away from external lights. The ship dimmed until only faint emergency strips traced the corridor walls. Ahead, the moon's massive silhouette swallowed starlight. "Cut emissions," he ordered. Feeling the command ripple through the nexus, reactor output dropped to minimal survival levels. Air recyclers slowed, and the temperature dipped sharply. Frost crept along the edges of the viewport, behind them. The Hunter vessel scanned Earth's orbit, beams slicing through vacuum like invisible blades. Daniel felt each sweep as a prickling tension along his spine. If they burned too bright, they would be seen. If they powered down too far, life support would fail. Celestia slid into the moon's shadow, silent as drifting debris. For a moment, the Hunter's sensors overshot. Daniel held his breath, counting heartbeats against the hum of thinning oxygen. Survival meant becoming invisible. The Hunter adjusted faster than expected. A spike of radiation flared across Celestia's hull as scanning beams pierced the lunar shadow. Daniel felt the impact like a punch to his chest. "They see us!" someone warned. But he was already moving. Through the nexus. Weapon systems unfolded in his mind. Plasma capacitors charging. Magnetic rails aligning. Shields dipped to 50%. Another blast scraped the hull, tearing sparks across vacuum. If he waited, they would be crippled. If he struck, they would escalate. The Hunter's silhouette drifted into partial view. Engines glowing like twin wounds. Daniel locked targeting vectors, hands hovering though he needed no controls. "Fire!" The command surged through him. Celestia answered with a violent pulse of blue-white energy. The recoil rattled the bridge. Plasma bolts streaked across space and slammed into the Hunter's flank, ripping armor in molten shards. There was no turning back now. Daniel stepped off the subway into humid morning air, the city roaring around him as if nothing had changed. Concrete under his boots felt unreal after vacuum silence. Traffic horns blared, steam rose from street grates, and delivery notifications stacked across his phone. The Nexus rested cold against his wrist beneath his sleeve, but he could still feel Celestia humming somewhere above the sky. Every vibration of a passing truck made his pulse spike, half expecting plasma fire to tear through the clouds. He forced himself into routine. Scan barcode. Lift package. Knock. Move. Survival here meant invisibility. No one could know that orbit had nearly burned. In a storefront reflection, he barely recognized himself. His eyes carried sleepless orbit light. A helicopter passed overhead, and his muscles tensed automatically. He was back on Earth. But Earth no longer felt small. It felt exposed. Ryan caught him staring at nothing during lunch break, sandwich untouched in his hand. "You're not here," Ryan said quietly. Daniel blinked, dragging his focus back from the faint tremor he felt through the Nexus. Somewhere above the clouds. Celestia adjusted orbit. He forced a shrug. "Just tired." Ryan didn't buy it. He leaned closer, lowering his voice over the noise of traffic. You vanish every night. You jump at every sound. And what's that? His eyes flicked toward Daniel's sleeve, where faint light pulsed beneath fabric. Daniel instinctively pulled his arm back. A delivery truck backfired across the street, and Daniel flinched hard, heart hammering. To Ryan, it looked like anxiety. To Daniel, it sounded like weapons fire. Ryan studied him longer than comfort allowed. "If you're in trouble," he said, "I need to know." Daniel swallowed. Trouble didn't begin to cover it. Night swallowed the city, and Daniel vanished from his apartment in a pulse of cold light. The bridge of Celestia greeted him with dimmed illumination, combat systems already primed. "Simulation active," the ship whispered through the Nexus. Gravity dropped to 0. Drone targets materialized around him, angular and hostile. Arya ignited controlled arcs of flame along the far wall, forcing him to maneuver through heat distortion. Celine's voice threaded calm through the chaos, steadying his pulse as warning alerts shrieked. Nyx shifted forms, testing his reaction speed with unpredictable vectors. Plasma bursts grazed his shoulder. The impact translated as electric pain through his nervous system. Oxygen levels dipped deliberately, forcing efficiency. Sweat drifted from his skin in floating spheres. "Again," he rasped when the simulation reset. Survival demanded reflex over fear. Each failure cost seconds. In real combat, seconds meant extinction. The alarm tore through the bridge before Daniel fully materialized from transit. Celestia's hull vibrated under sudden gravitational distortion. A new signature punched into orbit without warning, larger than the last, heavier, deliberate. The viewport darkened as something eclipsed starlight. The hunter vessel unfolded like a blade, armor layered in jagged plates that reflected Earth's glow with cold indifference. Targeting locks snapped into place, their frequencies scraping across Daniel's mind through the Nexus. Shields auto-boosted, draining reserves instantly. "Impact window under 30 seconds, Celine warned, her voice steady but tight. Arya's hands ignited in readiness, heat rippling across the console. Daniel felt the hunter's reactor spin up, an enormous pulse building toward discharge. There would be no hiding behind lunar shadow this time. The hunter did not scan. It attacked. The first beam carved across space, tearing through the silence toward Earth's orbit. Daniel's vision blurred as the hunter's beam grazed Celestia's shields, energy bleeding off in violent arcs. "We can't outgun that," he muttered, already calculating trajectories through the Nexus stream, flooding his mind. The moon loomed to starboard, its gravity well a potential weapon. "Full burn toward lunar vector," he ordered. Engines roared, inertial dampeners straining as acceleration crushed against his ribs. Celestia dove toward the moon's curvature, skimming dangerously close to its surface. Rock and dust blurred beneath them in silent vacuum. The hunter followed, confident, heavy. Daniel waited until gravitational pull tightened like a fist around the hull. "Now," he whispered. Celestia pivoted sharply, using the moon's mass to whip around in a violent arc. The maneuver snapped the hunter's targeting solution off balance. Their massive pursuer overshot. Shields flaring as debris and gravitational drag destabilized its path. Celestia completed the arc, engines screaming as Daniel forced every remaining watt into the forward cannons. The hunter struggled to correct its trajectory, massive hull exposed for a breathless fraction of time. "All power to primary array," Daniel commanded, feeling the Nexus siphon strength from his own nervous system. Pain flared behind his eyes. Arya triggered the charge sequence. Capacitors whined past safe thresholds. The hunter fired blindly, beams carving molten scars across lunar rock. Daniel locked onto the exposed reactor seam, glowing along the enemy's spine. Fire! A concentrated blast erupted from Celestia, a spear of blue-white fury tearing across vacuum. It struck dead center. For a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then the hunter's core destabilized. Light burst outward in a silent, expanding bloom, ripping the vessel apart in fragments of burning metal. Shockwaves rattled Celestia violently. Shields collapsed to critical. Silence followed, fragile and temporary. The debris field still burned in slow arcs when Celestia's sensors screamed again. Daniel barely had time to steady his breathing before new distortions tore open space beyond Earth's limb. One signature multiplied into 3. Then, pumuta. Larger mass readings than the last hunter. Inbound warp breaches, Celine reported. Voice sharpened despite her calm. The Nexus translated the data directly into Daniel's nerves. Coordinated formation, synchronized approach vectors, weapons already cycling. These weren't scouts. They were executioners. Celestia's shields flickered at 40%, scarred and unstable from the previous blast. Daniel felt the ship's fatigue like muscle strain beneath skin. Earth rotated helplessly beneath the incoming formation, unaware. A faint civilian satellite blinked between the new arrivals and the planet, fragile and irrelevant. The hunters adjusted, spreading into a net across orbital lanes. Daniel understood instantly this was containment. They were sealing Earth in. The Nexus pulsed harder, heat spreading beneath Daniel's skin like a fever. Celestia's reactors demanded more output than reserves allowed. Shield lattice collapsing in 12 minutes, Celine warned. Daniel rerouted auxiliary grids, but every adjustment cost him. The device on his wrist tightened, thin filaments of light threading up his arm and into his spine. His vision tunneled as the ship siphoned neural energy to stabilize its core. Outside. The hunters advanced in silent formation, energy signatures rising in synchronized waves. Daniel tasted iron at the back of his throat. Sweat dripped into his eyes, though the bridge was cold. "I can hold it," he muttered, though his hands trembled. Arya watched him carefully. Flames dimmed in concern. Celestia's internal temperature spiked, then dipped, then surged again. The power wasn't just draining systems, it was draining him. Down on Earth, radar arrays began picking up anomalies that no algorithm could classify. Civilian satellites flickered with unexplained interference, their feeds briefly washing out in static before restoring. Daniel watched the data cascade across Celestia's interface, human frequencies overlapping hunter emissions. News networks reported strange auroras rippling over the Atlantic. Governments scrambled, launching encrypted scans into orbit. "They're noticing," Nick said quietly, her form shifting with tension. The hunters intensified their formation, weapons cycling openly now, no longer hiding behind stealth protocols. Celestia's cloak sputtered, unable to mask both itself and the widening distortions around Earth. Daniel felt the pressure mounting from 2 directions: alien predators above, human curiosity below. If he engaged fully, the world would see. If he stayed hidden, the hunters would close the net. The line between secrecy and survival dissolved. Impact alarms detonated across the bridge as grappling harpoons slammed into Celestia's outer hull. The entire structure lurched sideways, artificial gravity flickering violently. Daniel felt the hooks bite through shielding like teeth through bone. "Hull breach, port section," Celine called, already rerouting internal barriers. Atmosphere screamed through a ruptured corridor, dragging loose panels into vacuum. Emergency bulkheads sealed with explosive force. But metallic shrieks echoed through the ship as cutting torches began drilling inward. The hunters weren't waiting for orbital victory. They were boarding. Daniel sprinted toward the breach, Nexus flaring as combat protocols overlaid his vision. Through internal sensors, he saw shapes breaching the outer shell, armored silhouettes stepping through sparks and decompression mist. Aria ignited defensive corridors in controlled firewalls. Nyx shifted into hardened form beside him. The hunters forced entry with mechanical precision. Survival was no longer distant. It was inside the ship. The corridor shook as armored hunters advanced through smoke and ruptured wiring. Nyx shifted mid-stride, her body hardening into a blade-edged silhouette to block the narrow passage. Plasma fire erupted, scorching metal and tearing into her luminous form. Daniel felt the impact through the Nexus, like nerves being severed. "Fall back," he shouted. But Nyx held position, buying seconds with calculated strikes. Another blast hit her center mass. Light fractured across her surface, flickering unstable. The air depressurized again, emergency fields straining to contain vacuum pull. Nyx staggered, her shape dissolving in fragments of silver mist. "Core destabilizing," Celine warned, voice tight with emotion she could not hide. Daniel lunged forward, dragging Nyx's fading body behind a sealed bulkhead as debris hammered against it. The hunters pressed closer. Nyx's glow dimmed to a fragile pulse. She had absorbed the breach. As Daniel sealed the last bulkhead, a sharp spike surged through the Nexus. External arrays flashed red across his vision. "Transmission breach," Celine said, horror slipping through her composure. One of the hunter boarding units had anchored a relay beacon to Celestia's outer hull before being destroyed. It pulsed now with violent clarity, broadcasting a quantum signature far beyond the solar system. Daniel forced access to exterior feeds and saw the beacon flare. Projecting Earth's orbital coordinates into open space, a cascade of encrypted signals radiated outward, marking the planet as a target. Down below, human satellites began detecting unusual energy bursts. News networks reported strange streaks of light over the horizon. Earth was no longer hidden in cosmic anonymity. The hunters had lit a flare over humanity's head. Daniel felt the weight settle in his chest. This wasn't a battle for secrecy anymore. It was survival in plain sight. The breach alarms finally died, leaving only the low hiss of compromised air systems. Daniel floated in a dim auxiliary chamber where gravity had failed, boots barely grazing the wall. Frost crept along fractured panels, glittering in emergency light. Oxygen levels ticked downward in slow, indifferent numbers. Through the Nexus, he felt Celestia struggling, power grids rerouting, structural stress groaning like a wounded animal. Beyond the hull, hunter vessels held formation, patient and unmoving. No immediate attack, just waiting. The silence pressed harder than gunfire. Nyx's signal flickered faintly, somewhere deep in the ship's core. Unstable, but alive. Daniel steadied his breathing, forcing his racing pulse to slow. He listened for any vibration that meant another breach. Nothing. Only the quiet drift of debris outside and Earth turning beneath distant stars. In that suspended moment, survival felt terrifyingly fragile. Daniel pushed gently off the wall, drifting toward the viewport where Earth glowed in quiet blue beneath them. Hunter ships hovered like dark constellations, unmoving yet suffocating. He waited for fear to recede, but it didn't. It sharpened. The hunters were not rushing because they didn't need to. They had exposed Earth. Reinforcements would come. Hiding behind shadow and cloaks had only delayed the inevitable. Through the Nexus, he felt Celestia's systems faltering, running on borrowed reserves. Every defensive maneuver drained him further. He had been fighting to survive without being seen. That strategy was already dead. If Earth was marked, secrecy no longer protected it. Silence only gave the hunters time. Daniel closed his eyes and let the weight settle fully. Survival wasn't about remaining unnoticed. It was about choosing to stand visible, even if it invited greater danger. Daniel opened his eyes and felt the Nexus answer, steady despite the strain. "Deactivate cloak," he said quietly. Celestia shimmered as its concealment field dissolved, revealing the ship in full orbit above Earth. Hunter sensors immediately shifted, targeting recalibrating toward the visible threat. He stepped onto the bridge, ignoring the tremor in his hands. "Open all channels," he ordered. Global frequencies flooded in, military bands, civilian satellites, emergency networks. The sky over New York tore open in a column of controlled light as Celestia descended just enough to be undeniable. Panic rippled through human systems. But Daniel kept his voice level. He broadcast one clear message. Earth was not alone, and hiding had failed. Through the Nexus, he transmitted a secondary signal, Kyle,'s encoded diplomatic beacon, calling distant allies. The hunters tightened formation. Daniel chose visibility over fear. Celestia descended through the upper atmosphere in a controlled burn, its hull glowing as friction ignited streaks of fire across the night sky. Thousands of phones turned upward as the ship slowed above Manhattan, hovering between skyscrapers and storm clouds. Shockwaves rippled glass, but stopped short of shattering it. Daniel stood at the center of the bridge, Nexus blazing against his skin. "Stabilize atmospheric output," he ordered, ensuring no destructive turbulence reached the streets below. Hunter vessels shifted in orbit, watching. Celestia's exterior panels unfolded deliberately, revealing defensive arrays, but holding fire. Daniel routed power into a visible energy shield that flared softly around the ship, like a translucent dome. The message was clear. Power restrained, not unleashed. News networks broke into emergency broadcasts worldwide. Humanity stared at proof written in light. Daniel had chosen to show strength without destruction. Celestia projected a stabilized holographic conduit directly into the United Nations Assembly Chamber, light folding into Daniel's full-scale image at the center podium. Delegates froze, security scrambling, but powerless. He felt millions watching through broadcast feeds worldwide. The Nexus translated atmospheric fluctuations, heartbeats, fear spikes. Daniel kept his voice measured. He explained the hunter threat, the exposed coordinates, the imminent danger no nation could face alone. Behind him, Celestia's orbital map displayed hostile vessels in cold precision. He did not plead. He presented survival mathematics. Cooperation increased probability. Isolation guaranteed extinction. Military advisors whispered urgently. Some leaders demanded proof of control. Daniel responded by demonstrating limited shield redirection, intercepting a minor hunter probe before it could descend. No collateral damage. Controlled force. The hull shifted from disbelief to calculation. Humanity had seconds to evolve. Daniel triggered Kyle's diplomatic beacon through the Nexus, transmitting layered quantum codes into deep space for several heartbeats. Only static filled the orbital spectrum. Then, space itself rippled beyond the hunter formation. Multiple warp signatures bloomed like distant suns igniting. Holographic channels opened simultaneously above Earth's atmosphere. Alien vessels emerging in precise geometric alignment. Their energy signatures dwarfed the hunters. The hostile ships hesitated, formation tightening defensively. A transmission overrode all frequencies, measured, ancient, amplified across planetary networks. The voice did not threaten. It declared recognition. Earth was now registered under Kael's Alliance protection protocols. Daniel felt Celestia stabilize as allied shield grids interlocked with his own. The hunters recalculated. Survival probabilities shifted dramatically. The sky above Earth transformed from battlefield to coalition. Humanity witnessed its first true galactic contact under live global broadcast. Allied vessels locked into formation around Earth, their hulls projecting layered shield matrices that intersected with Celestia's own. Daniel felt the lattice connect through the nexus like synchronized heartbeats merging into one rhythm. Hunter ships reacted instantly, breaking containment pattern and charging weapons in coordinated arcs. The first barrage slammed into the outermost shield ring, detonating in violent flashes that illuminated the planet's night side. Energy readings spiked beyond safe parameters. Daniel rerouted surplus power to reinforce weak nodes, his nerves burning as the nexus amplified the strain. Arya stabilized thermal surges along the grid, while Selene managed harmonic resonance to prevent shield collapse. Nyx, still weakened, anchored structural flow within Celestia's core. The combined defense held, but barely. The hunters intensified fire, testing the Alliance's unity. Survival now depended on coordination flawless under pressure. The hunter barrage intensified, hammering weak points in the shield lattice with surgical precision. Daniel felt every impact through the nexus, as if fists were striking his spine. "Power deficit rising," Selene warned, but he was already overriding safety protocols. He opened a direct neural conduit to Celestia's core, allowing the ship to draw raw bioelectric charge from his nervous system. Pain exploded behind his eyes, white and blinding. His pulse spiked erratically as shield nodes flared brighter. Stabilizing under the surge, the Allied vessels synchronized to his frequency, reinforcing the expanding barrier. Blood traced from Daniel's nose in thin strands, floating in microgravity. Arya reached toward him, but stopped when the lattice steadied. Hunter beams refracted harmlessly into distant space. The cost etched itself into Daniel's trembling muscles. He was burning himself to keep Earth intact. The shield lattice blazed brighter than the hunter barrage, refracting each assault into harmless arcs of dissipated light. Daniel's vision blurred, but he forced himself to remain connected. Allied vessels adjusted formation with flawless precision, tightening the defensive net until no weak vector remained. Hunter ships hesitated, their firing patterns faltering as tactical calculations recalibrated. One by one, their engines flared, shifting from attack posture to retreat alignment. The massive silhouettes withdrew in controlled bursts of warp distortion, leaving only fading radiation trails behind. Silence spread across orbit, broken only by the hum of stabilized shields. Daniel severed the neural conduit, collapsing against the console as the nexus dimmed to a low pulse. Earth rotated beneath them, untouched. The immediate threat had passed. Survival, for now, belonged to humanity. Orbit settled into uneasy calm as Allied vessels maintained distant patrol arcs. Celestia drifted at reduced output, its systems cooling after sustained overload. Daniel remained seated on the bridge floor, breathing slowly as med diagnostics scanned his neural strain. The nexus pulsed faintly, no longer demanding, only stabilizing. Below, Earth's network surged with coordinated global response, emergency briefings, scientific summits, defense coalitions forming in real time. Satellite grids recalibrated to integrate with the new orbital shield framework. Humanity had not been destroyed. It had been initiated. Selene confirmed casualty reports. Minimal atmospheric damage. No surface impact. Aria extinguished residual thermal flare along the hull. Nyx's core signature steadied into fragile equilibrium. The battle had ended without planetary loss. But the silence felt heavier than combat. Survival had forced evolution overnight. Daniel stood before the viewport long after the system stabilized. Watching sunrise sweep across continents, he had nearly lost. The Nexus no longer burned, but it had left something behind. A quiet gravity in his posture, a steadiness forged in strain. His reflection in the glass looked older, not in years, but in weight. He could still feel the echo of neural overload along his spine, a reminder of what survival had cost. Earth's transmissions flowed steadily now, coordinated and purposeful. Nations that once distrusted each other were sharing orbital defense protocols. Aria watched him without speaking. Selene's presence hovered near. Sensing the shift in him, Nyx's form shimmered faintly, recovering. Daniel understood something simple and irreversible. He was no longer reacting to danger. He was choosing responsibility. The ordinary life he once clung to had burned away in vacuum. What remained was intention. Celestia held position high above the curve of Earth, its hull reflecting both starlight and the faint glow of a planet, newly awakened. Daniel stood at the center of the bridge, the Nexus resting quietly against his wrist. No longer a weapon, but a covenant. Allied vessels drifted at respectful distance, silent guardians marking Earth's entry into a wider universe. Below, cities pulsed with fragile light, unaware of how close extinction had come. Daniel felt the weight of orbit settle into something steadier, purpose rather than panic. The scars in his nervous system would remain, subtle reminders etched beneath skin. Aria's fire burned low, Selene's presence calm, Nyx's shimmer restored. The hunters would return someday. Survival was never permanent, but humanity was no longer hiding. Daniel lifted his gaze toward open space. He was no longer a delivery driver. He was keeper. Daniel survived, but survival changed him. Earth stepped into the stars. No longer alone, no longer hidden. The battle proved that power does not define us. The choices we make under pressure do. When faced with extinction, humanity chose unity. When faced with fear, one man chose responsibility. This was only the beginning. If you felt the weight of orbit and the fire of decision, follow the channel and join us for the next journey into the unknown.